And good morning to you. A dire warning we start with this morning from a Western journalist, the first Western journalist allowed inside the terror group ISIS. He has come back reporting that they are far more organized and far more powerful than we actually were led to believe. The words he describes are stronger and more dangerous is this terror group than many were led to believe here in the Western world. Jonathan Halevi is here to talk about this. This is a German journalist, a man who investigates both sides a lot of the time. In Afghanistan, for example, he looked at the Afghan side of things. He looked at the Taliban. He has looked at Al-Qaeda. So, I mean, he is a guy who says he is balanced. What do you take from his original report, saying that it is stronger and much more dangerous when it comes to ISIS?
I think he's right. He's correct. His account is correct. I'm watching the ISIS for many months, and I can see a variety of videos that ISIS produced. And you see how ISIS is preoccupied in state and nation building inside Syria and Iraq, and they did it meticulously. And you can see the establishment being built by ISIS. It starts with police, religious police, and enforcing the Sharia law very strictly. You know, like chopping hands of thieves, stoning to death adulterers, and also gays being thrown from the buildings and then stoned to death, and flogging those who are smokers or just don't come to the prayer. To municipal services, ISIS took control of all services inside Syria and Iraq, and they provide all these services to the people. If somebody, for example, if there is an outage in one of the cities, they repair it, they supply water, they clean the streets, and most important, they working on the education inside the territory under their control.
Yeah, this is very different than I think what a lot of people had conjured up in their heads. You know, here in the West, we tend to think of the Taliban, we tend to think of Al-Qaeda, we tend to think of people sleeping out in the desert, basically, where there is no structure, there is only one end game, that is terror, and the rest of it sort of falls by the wayside. This has got organized tentacles to it, and that's a lot different than the other terror groups we've seen.
100%. This is not ISIS is not a group. ISIS is not an organization. ISIS is a state in building a state inside Syria and Iraq. The area, the territory under its command, it's enormous. So they build a new generation. They focus on building a new generation, not just killing people indiscriminately. They want the people with them. They working with the clans, with the tribes, the Bedouin tribes and Arab tribes inside Syria and Iraq. Many of them pledged allegiance to ISIS. They collect taxes from the residents, from the tribes. They operate the bakeries. They supply food, supply bread. Everything is being under control of ISIS. ISIS is building a state. And it was proclaimed, declared as a state, as an Islamic state, caliphate, in late June. And, you know, almost 6 months, and it's still working. It's still surviving.
This reporter gained access to Mosul. That was where he was sort of set up and what he got to see firsthand. He reported that there were hundreds of people coming in daily from all different parts of the world to join this group. That kind of recruiting was still going on despite the airstrikes.
Yes, 100%. You know, the inspiration of the caliphate, it's well embedded in the Islamic faith. Muslims want to see the re-establishment of the caliphate, which was, you know, dismantled in the last century, and they want to see it. This is part of their belief, to see Islam, the glory of Islam being restored. So for them, you know, preaching and talking about the caliphate and seeing the dream comes true in Syria and Iraq, for many Muslims worldwide, even here in the West, it's you know, gravitating them into being part of this dream.
Mosul alone, they were saying 5,000 people in that particular jurisdiction. So we're talking about thousands across that area of Iraq and Syria, yes?
Yes, it's not just from the West. You have many thousands. Just look at the numbers of those who were killed during the fighting in last years. You would see that thousands of them came from the West, from North Africa, from Saudi Arabia, many of them. I think the largest group are from Saudi Arabia, Tunisia, Algeria. But it's shared by many other Muslims. That's why you see so many being gravitated to join the jihad, and they're being rewarded. A personal reward, which means a paradise, and to be the shaheed and to marry 72 virgins and have the sexual power of 100 men, and they can bring also with them 70 family members to paradise if they die as shaheed, and they are also being glorified by by family members, by the society, because they were part of the Mujahideen. I saw just yesterday a new video of ISIS. There's a young guy from Algeria. He came and joined ISIS in Syria. And he chose to be a suicide bomber at Rakbam. And what he said is, here we can really taste life, and the suicide bombing attack, this is the true life.
When it comes to bringing a Western journalist into ISIS, in to see what is going on, there's obviously a purpose to it, right? They want everybody to know just how powerful they are, just what's going on, but they're going to show a lot of that from their side. So how much of this is propaganda and how much of it is actual truth?
ISIS provide videos from Raqqa, from other cities for months. And you can see this evidence. They control the area, and you cannot see any signs of rebellion against ISIS. You would see fight between ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra in some cases, okay? But it's only a struggle over expanding the boundaries of the caliphate. Inside these territories, there's no sign of any opposition against ISIS. And most of the tribes, the population, support ISIS because they don't have any other choice. And second, there is a new establishment. And as long as this process is going on and they deepen their control over
those roots.
Yes, and you cannot change it anymore. And the most important thing is the education, because they really preoccupied with building a new education, new jihadist generation.
Yeah, and they, as you mentioned, they've set up a social welfare system, they've set up a school system in order to do just that.
Yes, in the mosque. And you see, and in about let's say 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and you have new recruits from the society inside the caliphate. And then you have a huge problem, not only for the West, but for the neighboring countries. You're building a new generation just as Hamas did in Gaza. So then you have to deal with the new jihadist state.
Talk to me about the weaponry for a second, because this German reporter observed German weapons in the hands of these ISIS terrorists, assault rifles and what have you, machine guns. Where are they coming from?
As I watched in the videos, many of the weapons that in the hands of ISIS came from as a spoils of war against the Iraqi army or the Syrian army, and they gathered large amount of weapons, from small arms to tanks, artillery, Scud missiles, you name it. And I think that they also rely on smuggling weapons from outside. And they also started a military industry inside the caliphate. And you see new missiles being built by engineers. And it's not, it's not surprising. I've seen calls from ISIS a month ago to engineers, even the Canadian jihadist from Timmins. He called the engineers, come to us, join us, and help us to build this new state.
All of this said, does this mean that airstrikes alone aren't going to solve this problem? That if you continue to airstrike, then you're going to continue to build the numbers for ISIS? Eventually, they will just continue to recruit because people will be frustrated with the airstrikes themselves, and thus it's sort of a revolving door, a circle, if you will.
The problem is with the strategy, with the current strategy, that, as Barack Obama has said, it's going to take years. But when it takes years, they are building a new generation. So the airstrikes cannot change the mind of ISIS and its supporters. And if you lose the war, you will have to face a new entity. And I think that the problem is, who is going to do the dirty job? Whether the West, soldiers from the US, from Canada, from Europe, or the Arabs themselves, the Iraqi people, the Saudi people. And I think that they should bear the most of the burden of earning the democracy and liberalism with their own hands.
How much bigger is this group going to get in your mind?
I think that it's not group, it's state.
Mm-hmm.
The state is going to be, if nothing is not going to change, and Turkey or the other regional superpower, Iran, will not going to be involved directly in a large scale in the fighting. I think they will manage to establish the caliphate in this area.
Jonathan Halevi, we appreciate the time on this very fascinating stuff.